There are two Cowens involved in Mansfield today. One is the prettiest of the Cowen family, as in Samantha. The other one is the award-winning Cowen. I'm talking about Nick Cowen, who joins us now from London on Mansfield today. He's an award-winning person he's written for people like The Guardian, The Telegraph, locally for the South African Citizen magazine. He's the associate editor of Stuff magazine at this stage, and he's an expert on gaming, which is a massive industry right now. Nick, nice to have you with us in the Mansfield Today studio. Welcome. I don't want to say that maybe you have a split personality, but the two games you came up with that you want to discuss with today are very, very different. Take us through the two. One is Resident Evil Village, and the other one is Pokemon Snap. Let's talk about Resident Evil Village first.
Okay, well, Resident Evil Village is the latest installment in the very, very long-running and very, very popular Resident Evil survival horror genre. It's essentially what it is you take on the role of a couple of characters. You are plunked in the eponymous village, which is somewhere in Eastern Europe. And essentially, you have to survive with very little resources, a few bullets, and a heck of a lot of monsters and creepy folk around you.
Who's this aimed at, Nick?
I would say that it's aimed at, obviously fans of the series, because it's a long-running series. But, the great thing about Resident Evil Village is if you're a fan of, and this is very important, if you're over the age of 18, this is an age-restricted game. If you gravitate towards horror, this is imagine watching a horror film, except instead of watching it, you're an active participant in it. You are the poor soul who the monsters are trying to get.
How scary is it?
It's absolutely, genuinely terrifying, and that's worth mentioning because, like I said, Resident Evil has been around for a very long time. And around about Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 6, it stopped being scary and it kind of became some sort of run-and-gun, action-filled adventure series, which a lot of the fans didn't like. Then Resident Evil 7 Biohazard came out in 2017, and it kind of returned it to its roots by making the player feel as vulnerable as possible, like anything could happen, and also putting them against enemies that they couldn't actually kill. They had to just run and hide. Resident Evil Village, which is the 8th installment of the main series, takes that baton and runs with it. Once again, you're very, very vulnerable. You have very limited resources. And of course, you've got horrifically designed monsters searching you, some of which I will not discuss just because they're not exactly what you'd call family friendly, to put it bluntly. But some of, they're just really, really terrifying. What Resident Evil Village does very, very well is it makes you kind of feel like the hero, but it also makes you feel as though you could die at any minute, and in a very, very grisly fashion.
Okay, I know nothing about gaming, so
right.
Give me a comparison here to horror films or TV shows that are the same genre.
All right then. Okay, so imagine you were watching The Walking Dead. Right, everyone's seen The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
All right, and it was one of those tense moments where a character's walking down a corridor, the music's completely dropped out. You know, as the audience, you're completely tensed and ready to go. Now imagine instead of watching that person, you are that person.
No,
it's comparative to that.
Yes.
It's terrifying. It essentially puts you as the star of a horror show. Whether or not that appeals to you, that's up to you.
Well,
the light is on and brightly the matter.
Well, I'm glad we started with that one because and didn't finish with that one. Let's move on to Pokemon Snap. I mean, everyone knows Pokemon, but what is Pokemon Snap?
Okay, to give it its proper title is New Pokemon Snap. It's a sequel to a game called Pokemon Snap. But what it basically is imagine you're sitting in a car in a game reserve, and your job is to take pictures of the animals in the game reserve. Now, in this instance, the game reserve is essentially filled with Pokemon and all these sort of weird and wonderful creatures. And you earn stars by taking interesting pictures of them. So, for example, you can take your average picture of, say, if you find a Pikachu or something like that. But if you catch, say, for example, a Pokemon yawning, or if you catch it digging up something, or if you catch two Pokemon in the same frame, you get more stars, and with more stars, you advance through the game. It's basically it's almost like a virtual nature photography game, except with Pokemon, if that makes sense.
Okay, does make sense. Obviously aimed at children, I would imagine.
Well, that's the funny thing about Pokemon. It spans generations, just because it's been around for such a long, long time. And obviously, Pokemon has been everything from video games to a card game to collectible toys to movies to television series. So if you imagine when you started, if you started watching or playing Pokemon in the early 2000s, you're probably in university at the minute, and you'll still gravitate towards this because it's such a really it's a really really open and loving community. I mean, that was shown, for example, a few years back when if you remember, Pokemon Go came out, where you wandered around with your iPhone or your Google phone, essentially collecting virtual Pokemon. You know, Obviously it appealed to loads and loads of kids, but you even had situations in this country where university students were organizing Pokemon parties, where they would put up on campus en masse and just run around after these virtual animals. So I would say it appeals to children of all ages. I mean, everyone's got a kid inside them at some stage, and Pokemon appeals to that.
Nick Cowen, thank you very much for joining us on
No,
Mansfield today. We'll catch up with you again next week, same time, same place. Nick Cowen is the associate editor of Stuff magazine and is resident in London.